In this video, we'll take a look at best practices for introducing, practicing, and reviewing new vocabulary words. At Intercambio, we've found that students learn new vocabulary best when it's presented within a context, as opposed to asking students to memorize a list of isolated words. For this reason, every Confidence and Connections lesson begins with an audio track that uses some of the vocabulary words for the lesson in a conversation that's linked to a particular situation. In every lesson, students listen to the audio track conversation without having learned the vocabulary words yet. This is important because students can likely understand the general idea of what's happening in the conversation and can often infer the meanings of the new vocabulary words from the context. This is a skill that students must learn to use even when listening to conversations out in the community. The listening tracks are recorded at a natural pace that's designed to mimic conversations students might hear out in the community. Students probably won't understand all of the words, and that's okay. When students get to the vocabulary section of the lesson and learn the new words, they'll remember them from the conversation they heard at the beginning, and the words will have more meaning attached to them, which makes them easier to recall later. Each lesson in Confidence and Connections has a limited number of vocabulary words. Students are likely to retain only a small number of new vocabulary words from each lesson, so we try not to overwhelm them with too many new words. Additional words. Help students focus on words that will be most useful to them. If an important word for them is not included in the topic, for example, their profession isn't listed in the vocabulary list for a lesson about jobs, you should teach them that word that they need to know. Try not to include more than 2 or 3 additional words though, so that students don't become overwhelmed. Also, it's important for students to write down any additional words in their book. Now let's look at a few tips for presenting new vocabulary words. Although it can be tempting, we generally recommend not using your students' native language when presenting new vocabulary. We want to help them get away from translating in their head. One of the best ways to help students connect meaning to new words without translating them into their native language is to use visuals such as photos, drawings, or real objects, also known as realia. The more students can engage with a new word in different ways, the more likely they are to remember the meaning of the word. Before every lesson, be sure to look at the vocabulary section and think about what kinds of visuals or real objects you may want to bring to class with you to show the meaning of a word. Another way to help students engage with new vocabulary words is to have them act out the new word or copy a physical gesture that you create for the word. This is called total physical response. Studies show that when students engage in physical movement during learning, more oxygen flows to the brain, improving memory and learning skills. Encouraging students to do a physical movement while hearing and saying a new word also boosts learning by creating a brain link between speech and action. This technique can be particularly helpful for explaining the meanings of verbs. The back of the Confidence and Connections teacher book has more information about this topic. Pronunciation. The presentation of new vocabulary words is also a great time to work on students' pronunciation skills. One way to work on this is to have students listen for the stressed syllable in each new vocabulary word and underline it in their book. It can be helpful for you to also write the words on the board as you say them and underline the stressed syllable. This will help students remember how to pronounce the new word on their own. You can also use hand gestures or claps to highlight where the stressed syllable is in each word. Correct syllable stress is key to ensuring that students are understood when they interact in English in the community. Repetition. Students should repeat new vocabulary words at least 3 to 5 times in order to help the words stay in their long-term memory. It's best for students to repeat after hearing the teacher say the words. Students might be reluctant to say a new word without hearing it first, since they may not know how it's pronounced. There are many ways to use repetition. If working in a group, asking students to repeat several times together, also known as choral repetition, is a good option. Students can also repeat new words by mumbling to themselves, which can sometimes be less pressure than saying the new words in front of others. Checking for understanding. Once you've presented your students with new vocabulary words, it's important to check for understanding. To check that students understand the meaning of the new words, you can use one of these techniques. If you used pictures or real objects, hold them up and ask students to tell you the word they represent. If the vocabulary word is an action, you can act out the word, or have students act it out, and have the class tell you the word. You can also ask students to use the word in a sentence or give you an example of that word in a situation. This is especially helpful if they looked up the word on Google Translate and you want to make sure that they got the right definition. If you're teaching a group, you can play a game like the Fly Swatter game by writing 3 to 4 of the words on the board and having students hit the word that best fills the blank of a sentence that you create. You can also do this in a one-on-one class by asking students to point to the word in their book that would be the best fit for the sentence. Practicing and reviewing vocabulary. It's very important to practice and continue reviewing new vocabulary words on a regular basis. Students can make their own flashcards by writing the word on one side and drawing a picture or writing the definition of the word in English on the other side. Students can then use those flashcards to review at home or to play games with you in class, such as charades, Pictionary, or memory games. Make sure to continue reviewing vocabulary words from previous lessons at the beginning of each class. We hope you found the tips in this video to be helpful for presenting, practicing, and reviewing vocabulary words with your student. Please feel free to contact us with any questions. Thank you for being a part of the Intercambio movement.